Buenas tardes, familia. Mi nombre es Marángeli Mejía-Rabell. Tengo el honor de ser parte de la familia del Festival del Philadelphia Latino Film Festival. This is part of the conversations that we're having with filmmakers that are part of our cohort for 2023. And we're really excited to begin our session today. Our sessions are centered around 3 questions, but we're going to begin with a round of introductions. So who would like to go first?
I can go. Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia Costanzo. I'm a Cuban-American filmmaker from Los Angeles, and my film is Good Cuban Girls.
¿Y quién le sigue?
Sí, my name is Evelyn Lorena, and I am originally, well, I'm Guatemalan American, but I'm originally from North Carolina, which is the inspiration for the film. It's a short film called Gabriela, and it, yeah, and I'm based out of Los Angeles and Atlanta.
Thank you. And last but not least.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Madeleine. I'm Arian Blanco, also Cuban-American, from the illegitimate bastard 6th borough of Hudson County, New Jersey, born and raised.
Thank you so much. And your film?
Oh, La Bolita, it's called. La Bolita.
¿Cómo no? Muchísimas gracias. Bueno, gracias por compartir su trabajo con nosotros. We have been really inspired by your work and celebrating the diversity of our stories and your styles. And we're going to get, you have 3 questions in the chat, but I'm going to read the first one. So why inspire you to make your film, and what was the most challenging part of your filmmaking process? So, ¿qué les inspiró a hacer esta película y cuál fue el componente o el proceso, la parte más desafiante de su proceso como cineasta? And who?
My original inspiration was that I hadn't seen, I guess, Latino stories in the South. Like, I had seen different things from Texas or California, or about the trek of being like undocumented, and I felt that I wanted to see something about somebody's inner conflicts and their dreams and their hopes, and basically their entire inner life, especially for a young person. Like, I hadn't seen that particularly on screen, and I wanted to find a way to honor sort of that journey of being undocumented and being an immigrant and looking for something more. And so that's what that inspiration came, and then it kind of built on that, on this meditation I was having at the same time about what freedom means and how we put limitations on ourselves quite a bit. And so that also was incorporated in the story. And I guess the most challenging part was the water sequences, because we didn't actually shoot them underwater. We shot them on the Screen Gem soundstage, which we were able to negotiate to get. And it was very tricky because it's outside of my expertise and comfort zone of like how to create stunts and do all these things. But thankfully we got the right people together, and through some ingenuity and resourcefulness, we were able to create water. So it was cool. And just so everyone knows, like, the film is about a young undocumented Guatemalan woman who's trying to join a country club swim team, but it's really about her journey to self-acceptance.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for giving us insight in terms of that
Secreto. But now everyone...
secreto, pero funcionó todo muy bien. Muchísimas gracias. So who would like to go next?
I can go next. So Good Cuban Girls tells a story of the oldest daughter in the family who has to tell her family that she's actually planning on leaving home to go to college. And the entire film takes place in a car at a parking lot at a university. And it's a school her family wants her to go to. So it's 4 different generations of Cuban women all in one car between the ages of 11 and 85 or so. And it's definitely inspired by my own upbringing. My older sister was the first in the family to leave Los Angeles to go to college on the East Coast. And it was definitely a big deal when she left. So it was talking about those themes. And then it's inspired by the crazy Cuban women in my family that I grew up with and loved. And my great grandma lived to be 103, and she's one of the characters in the film. And she was born in Havana in 1914. So we grew up with all of those stories. And so it was about really like taking the women in my life who had inspired so much of like my wanting to be a storyteller and putting them all in one car and putting together all the craziness and comedy and dialogue that comes with that. So that definitely is what inspired me to make the film, and just wanting to get more like Latino women in the forefront of the screen and in the story. The most challenging thing for us was we really wanted to shoot it in a car that was very nostalgic, since the entire film's in the car. And we picked out a 1991 Dodge Caravan because of the seats, and you can see over them really well. And we got the car painted red, and we had this whole thing ready to go. And a week before we went to film, we were doing a lighting test, and I slid the sliding door off of the car. And so that night I called up my grandpa and my dad, and the three of us were in the driveway with like duct tape and trying to figure out the car. And I felt like a mechanic for a minute, where I was like, this car has to work. And we managed to get the door back on. So I think that was definitely the trickiest part of the shoot, of one, making sure the door didn't fall off while we were filming, and then dealing with October weather in Los Angeles, where some days it was hot, some days it was cold. And then we had 6 people in the car, and my DP was over 6 feet tall, squishing into random places. So definitely finding like unique ways we could use the car was probably the most challenging part, but I think it paid off in the best way.
Oye, estos secretos de los que nos estamos enterando, que nadie se da.
Oh, cool.
Can't wait to hear Mr. Blanco what he has to say, pero nicely.
Nothing that exciting, I don't think. But
No, cuéntanos.
sí, no. So La Bolita, La Bolita sits in this. Oh, thank you. In the universe of this TV series I've been developing, and when I say there's a whole team, behind me and with me developing this series called West of the City, which is structured as a bilingual sort of drama, Latino-centric bilingual drama, and the show itself goes between like the 80s and present day, around 4 childhood friends. And the inspiration for La Bolita was like, I wanted to create a standalone sort of story that provided a calling card to the TV series. So that's the inspiration right there. So what I did was I went back to 1978, right, where the series doesn't take place, where we meet 6-year-old versions of 2 of the 4 friends. And it's an origin story that kind of relates to who they are later in life in a lot of ways. And so in La Bolita, we basically meet 6-year-old Benny Blanco, whose young Cuban exile mother just scored an easy gig with the local bolitero. What could go wrong? And then certainly things go awry on that day that he's coming over, where she's sponsoring the telephone line so he can get the daily numbers. So that's the premise, and that's certainly the genesis of it. And the most exciting part is we also have a really well-produced proof of concept trailer of the TV series, where you meet adult versions of the 2 little kids that are introduced. So I have basically 4 actors playing 2 characters 46 years apart. And it's uncanny. I got them to look, when you see the little kids side by side in character with the grown-ups that played the same persons, it's really close. So to me, that was like the biggest kind of joy about it. So it really connects to this idea of the universe over time. And in terms of the most challenging process, the story, as one of the main writers of the story, and I certainly had some help with it, like really punching it up, it was in my head. And so we filmed it. And my producer, Jim Thalman, who's Italian-American, and he knows Spanish, but he doesn't know Spanish. He's looking at sort of the first version of it. He's like, Arian, there's no beginning. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's on the phone. If you saw she's on the phone. Yeah, but unless I already know your story as a Cuban-American, what a bolitero is, and this idea of hosting the phone, I have no idea what's going on. So that beginning structure with the contextual text very like Star Wars or Blade Runner, where we sort of in English describe the scene and give context to an audience, was my way in. And that was probably the toughest thing in terms of realizing after I filmed it, shoot, I didn't actually have a real beginning to it to enroll a full audience. But I feel good that we came up with something in the heat of that desperation to come up with a real opening.
So I need to ask you a question that will end on the editing floor, and my apologies if I missed something, but why Benny Blanco? Is it because it's the same Benny Blanco? You know that there is a Benny Blanco in Carlitos Way.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you say that, because in the TV series, I definitely have in mind where Benigno Blanco, the character, as an adult, people say, Benny Blanco from the Bronx, like a
He's
you know.
like,
But it's not. It's actually a very quintessential Cuban name,
correct.
and which is Benigno Blanco. So that's what I did was with all the characters, since they live in this duality, the four friends growing up, they all have sort of Latino names that kind of translate into English in terms of their nicknames. So Benigno Blanco, it started with actually one of my uncles, one of my great uncles, that's his actual name. And I just, to me, it's like quintessential Cubano, you know, and Benny Blanco, the four friends, is the one.
Yo no creo, estoy tratando de mirar, pero yo no creo que el personaje de Leguizamo es cubano tampoco.
No, he's Puerto Rican.
He's Puerto Rican, es Benny Blanco from the Bronx, pero es actually, el nombre de él es Carlos, bueno, está con Carlito, pero he's like a punk, right? Like, he's like the kid that in that ecosystem, I don't want to go into Carlito's way, that's a rabbit hole, but he's a guy that it's like the oddball. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but the reason I ask is because there is a character portrayed by John Leguizamo in a Brian De Palma film called Carlitos Way, right? Where at the end he kills Al Pacino. And he said, you remember me? I'm Benny Blanco from the Bronx. Y lo mata.
Spoiler alert.
That's right.
No,
That's
hey,
right.
pero it's a classic. So people that know the film, I mean, there are other questions of Pacino playing, ¿cómo se dice? Cuba, Boricua, and all
Tony.
this stuff. ¿Cómo no?
Tony from Scarface, which is one of the names of the other characters. Antonio de la Cruz.
Correct.
Is one of the four friends who's Tony, that's his nickname.
Correct.
And then there's Miguel Garcia, which is the other little boy you meet at the end in our film, La Abuelita.
Okay, but I'm glad that you address it. Sorry that I took that route.
Oh yeah, no worries, no worries.
You hear that name and I'm like, Benny Blanco from the Bronx? This is not Benny Blanco from the Bronx anyway. So thank you for that. And I can't wait to see the series and what you're doing with it. So please send us that trailer. Because I also want to offer that part of what we want to offer you is also opportunities to continue to lift your work and continue to keep people updated on what alum are doing. You guys ready after the detour to Brian De Palma's universe? A good film overall. That ready for the second question? So the second question is really centered into something that you guys have alluded here on your first answers here and there from dad and helping with the card to the agua que wasn't there to in your case where you're talking about your team, but how has collaboration impacting your filmmaking process and practice?
I think, go ahead.
I feel that this particular project was really personal. And so I actually hesitated on collaborating with anyone. I just kind of was like, this is just my little precious little secret thing. And I didn't even know if I even ever wanted to go into production. And then obviously the pandemic had hit, and I unfortunately had been in the hospital, and not for COVID, but for something else. And I don't know, I saw this call for projects with Netflix as the sponsor, and I submitted it just kind of blindly. I didn't even think about it. I was just like, you know what? I have nothing else going on right now because it's the pandemic. And thankfully, we got the funding through them and everything. And I would say that collaborating with them definitely changed a lot of my point of view, because like I said, originally I had a very specific idea about what, and it's still most of that stayed. It's just that the collaboration and the input from different mentors like Oscar Torres and other people from LALIF and the fellowship and even my producer, all those things added something else. I mean, I think it complicated the process a little bit in the middle of it because I was like, there's too many voices here. But by the end, I felt that everyone's notes were always pushing the story forward. And that I really appreciated. And it's something that I think I just kept learning how to do the whole I'm hearing with one ear and letting go of the other, you know, and also learning how to like interpret notes was like a huge thing, was like, you know, everyone's going to have an opinion about the film and everyone's had different opinions about it. And I had to sort of translate it to myself and learn how to translate that into something practical and tangible so that I could make the film better. Because a lot of times people will say things and they're very generalized and you're just like, I don't understand how to work with that or collaborate with that. So that was a cool thing to sort of learn how to reinterpret people and collaborate with them in a different way.
Thank you for that, Sophia.
I think for me, since this film was my thesis film coming out of my MFA from Loyola Marymount, I really utilized collaborating with other film students. And so coming out of my second year of school, we always had end of year screenings of everyone's projects. And I sat through every single film from freshman to grad student that came out. And I wrote down 5 films that I liked the cinematography on, because at that point I was like, okay, I'm shooting the whole thing in a car and I need someone who's going to be creative and work in tight spaces. And for each film I wrote down, it was the exact same DP. So I was like, okay, I got to interview this person. And so I interviewed him and he was great. His name's Gian. And he ended up being someone I collaborated with a lot on the project. So like just having access to so many screenings where I could like find crew right there was really important and really helpful in the process. And then he had come from Turkey to the United States to do his studies in film. And so it was cool too of collaborating even on like his story of coming to the US and what that looked like. And then the 2 abuelas in the film are actually my great aunts from Cuba, because I was having a hard time casting and they've never acted before. And the 2 of them and Gian would sit every single day and they'd talk about their stories of immigration. And they'd talk about what it was like to be here. So I think even just collaborating in that sense of, you know, someone might not have been Cuban, but we could all still have shared experiences and relate to each other on the film was really cool to see like, okay, this story is resonating in these ways. And just having a team that I trusted to be able to bounce ideas off of. So there's like a scene in the car where they have to get the fast food that's on the middle seat, slide it back to the back seat. And what we had originally visualized, we didn't account for the fact that soda straws are a little too tall for what the bottom of the seat is, and they wouldn't go through. So it was like, okay, we're coming back tomorrow. And Gianna's, my DP, was like, here's how we can readjust. Like, here's what we can do. My PD was on it. So I think just being able to have a team that we could trust, where it was like, okay, we can collaborate when things are hard or there's challenges, was really helpful in the process of making it.
Thank you so much for that. And different spaces, right? Totally different spaces, from the creative vision for the project to then the practical implementation of things to the water that wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like they're different components, but they're different spaces and different moments within the filmmaking process.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say I relate a lot to what you were saying, where it's like different people from different cultures were on the film, because like originally we had a different DP and then we had to switch and then we had to switch again for all were scheduling conflicts. And it was interesting because I was very happy with the person that we ended up choosing, but she is not Latina at all. Like the DP is actually like, she's like a German, you know, like national who lives in London. And so it was, it was great to take a story and be able to relate it to other people who maybe had no idea.
Claro, pero está la cuestión del elemento universal, right, de las experiencias, But there is also the fact that, like, for example, when it comes to the PHLAFF mission, it's about nurturing creatives, but it's also about facilitating cross-cultural dialogue. And to assume that cross-cultural or intercultural dialogue only happens when people are watching. No, it happens in all elements of the creative process and experience and journey. So thank you for offering that. Mr. Blanco, what do you have for us?
Collaboration, long-term relationships, when it comes to collaboration, is everything. And while you don't want to be closed-minded about bringing new blood and fresh perspective into your sphere, you do want that. Once you get to working with folks that you click with, you kind of come up together. And I'm just at a point where I've been blessed where, especially this particular film, that's so intimate and dealing with, you know, part of the cast, it's it's essentially 2 6-year-old little boys and 2 adult actors. My DP, I've known since 2nd grade. My producer since 4th grade. Gabriel, who was our production assistant, who has been doing light boards with me. He's younger than me since he was 11 at the Fringe Festival in New York City. He's a 30-year-old man who's basically working at studio productions professionally. He came on board, the little boy, the 6-year-old boy that plays Benny, he's my son, and he knew all of these people before he ever set on set. Walked on set. So that was, in this case, that was really important. That we had that shorthand, and it was kind of like a family atmosphere. The little boy that played Mickey at the end, that makes the appearance, they've known each other from beforehand, and we know that the parents know each other. So this idea of a real sort of family atmosphere. Sophia, I get that with using sort of family members because no one else fits the role when it's so particular. And then the other thing is I want to say just about theme is, in specificity, I think, is where you can really make an impact across audiences in terms of crossover appeal, because it's amazing how when you're more specific, people will then insert their own background and their own familiarity into that film, even though they're not Cuban or whatever the background is that's being portrayed. So the more authentic and the more specific you can be, I think, the more it actually translates or has a chance to translate to broad crossover appeal from audiences.
So much for that. Thank you so much for that. And again, people, the one thing that we capture, and part of the reason we're committed to this expansion, is that a lot of times the perception is that all of our stories are connected, right? And there is a connection of our culture, there is a connection in our voices, there is a connection on our legacy, but there are also so many layers, so much nuance, so much diversity. We are not a monolith, right? And that's the beauty of having such an expansive cohort of practitioners at different points in their careers with different experiences, different motivations that come, and just, the common thread is the lifting of stories. And the fact that being centered on our culture or being centered on our values doesn't mean one answer. It can mean many things. So thank you so much for sharing that. Well, the third and last question that we have for you is, how do you hope audiences will react to your film? And if you want, we can follow the same order that we follow for the last question.
Okay. I think about this a lot because I think about how to bridge something that is a little more quieter art house and have it be commercially viable, regardless of that thought process that I have a lot. My hope, regardless of whether it's seen as more art house or commercial, I only really care that I think people will create a little more empathy for their neighbors, particularly people who don't necessarily understand the undocumented experience, because you'd be surprised just in casual conversations with people. Well, I mean, you guys know, but casual conversations with people, how dismissed that community is and how stereotyped it is in so many ways. Little backhanded comments and things like it just like even on talk shows, I think like, back in, I don't know, maybe it was like 5 years ago, there was like on a talk show and somebody was like, oh yeah, the undocumented people just clean your toilets. And it's like, sure, but I mean, there's many people that clean, you know what I mean? And it's anyway, just like microaggressions that I think people don't even notice are part of their own psyche. And I just hope that seeing stories like this and the creation of this particular story is not only to keep healing that for the community, but also, like I said, to create more empathy, and that someone maybe thinks twice about their fellow neighbor and their fellow man who's going through something that is a very complicated issue. Like a lot of people will judge it and say, they need papers in this, but it's far more complicated, all the way rooted to like colonialism and all kinds of US policy and Western policies and things like that have affected our countries in Central America.
And not exclusive to non-Latinos.
No, it's not. Like, okay. Yeah, and you're talking about like Middle East.
We can be really cruel with our own people and have to continuously like check ourselves.
Yeah, actually, yeah, in the film, there is a moment with the mother where she says to Gabriela in the film, she says, I'm glad you're a little bit lighter because then you can pass as Italian. Like the internalized racism, even within the Latino community, is very strong. And so anyway, I hope it acts as a mirror, and there are literal mirrors in the film. So to look at themselves and hopefully, like I said, create a little more empathy. That's my biggest takeaway, I hope.
Muchísimas gracias por eso. Eso es un proceso en el que tenemos que estar. That's an ongoing process for each and every one of us every day. About ourselves, about everything else, and how we perceive the world. That's the reason stories and storytellers are so important, because it can open windows and it can open perceptions and perspectives and build bridges, right? Where dialogue is needed. And some of the conversations are tough, but they're necessary. So.
Yo me incluyo en eso porque yo pasé mucha de la vida así como pensando que yo no era bonita o tenía problema o algo, solo porque yo vivía en el sur y era latina y yo no conocía a nadie que era latina. Ahora ya no, ahora there's so many Latinos in the South and communities and everything, but at the time it was like, I don't know, maybe it was just the schools I went to or something, but it was very difficult to find like-minded sort of.
That's the one thing that I cannot turn off in this computer is a half an hour notice. Siempre suena, no importa. No, cómo no. Mucho que aprender día a día y nunca paramos de aprender. It's a lifelong experience, and we can be very cruel with ourselves and with others, right? And with our own family. So anyway, pero seguimos. ¿Qué más tenemos por ahí? Cuéntame. Okay, thank you so much for sharing, Evelyn. Sophia, what do you have for us?
I think for me, growing up with the family I grew up in and like their oral storytelling tradition, that was always something I wanted to pass down through my films. And similarly to you, Evelyn, I think one of the reasons I became a filmmaker was to help with empathy and show people a world that might be different from their own, but they could still relate to. So no matter someone's background, I hope that they watch this film and can find moments that they can relate to in terms of family dynamic or the women in their family. And I think one of the ways I try to enter that space is through comedy of like, it brings me so much joy when I'm at a screening for this film and people laugh at the jokes and the jokes are in Spanish, or, you know, it is something that might be specifically Cuban, but you find those ways to enter and laugh about it and relate to it still. So like showing Latinas in a positive, funny light too. Like, I don't think we always get to see that on the screen. And so I hope that's something people take from it and sort of seeing like the humor with the culture, things that are different from themselves. Or even for me, I went to college in the Midwest. So it was kind of a similar experience of I would share that I was Cuban or had that side of me and people would be really confused or they'd question it. And it was always being like, you know, I think there's ways to show almost, I don't want to call it normal because I think we're very unique in our culture and in my family, but you know, like this is a normal day for this family. This is a problem that they're dealing with and it's something that you could be dealing with it too. So I hope that that's something people take. And then I think more specifically, one of my biggest audiences for this was young Latino women of, my grandparents, they left Cuba. And what did that mean when they came to LA? And that's where they formed their community. And then my mom never left LA. Like that's where she went to school. She stayed close by. And now you have a daughter who's leaving home. So looking at what it means to leave home and hopefully inspiring young women that, it can be scary, but if that's something you want to do, or you want to do something that's different, and you're the first in a second generation family or first generation family to do so, that's okay too.
Bueno, thank you for that. Caballero.
Sí, señor. In terms of a reaction, if I get, one of my notes, I've done a lot of theater. I started in theater. And one of the notes that I would always give the cast when we're coming together to sort of rehearse for the play is have them cry or have them laugh, but not in between. The worst thing is like, it's okay. I want you to love it or hate it. That's the win, right? And for me, for at least La Abuelita, it's really, if people come away saying, what happens next? Oh my God, I want to know more about these characters. That's the win for La Abuelita, because then I can say, well, we have an entire universe that we've been developing to tell you the story in a much more involved and nuanced way. And it's portraying it's Latino-centric. I call it Latino-centric because the characters that make up West of the City is a combination of Latinos, Irish, Italians, the brew that makes up these working class communities that sit literally outside or west, that's the metaphor, major metropolitan cities that serve those cities, but they don't live there. And so that's where, La Abuelita is serving as hopefully the calling card to continue to tell that story. And I'll end with, my cousin, I got to give credit to my Cuban cousin, Adrian Rodriguez, playwright. His first play ever was called Cuban Operator, Please. Bilingual play, no subtitles or anything, in a play. And it was really well received. It got published eventually. It's out there. And I remember him sitting in the first performance at the Fringe Festival. We performed it in front of a sort of larger public. And he's like waiting in the sort of outside, and people are milling about and coming in to go see the play and other plays in that building. And he's like, if people just, even if this is the one story I have, as long as people say, boy, it was a good one, that's enough for me, and that's what it's about every time. We kind of bring ourselves to tell our stories through a play, through a film. It's a lot of work, right? So that's what I hope that audiences get out of it. Boy, was that a great story, even if it's my last one.
Oh, thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.